Let's go live. We are live.
We is live.
It is Sunday here. It is Saturday where Ryan is in LA. This is number 5 of Evolve Conversations, and super excited to be having these conversations on a Sunday. Ryan has been a close friend of mine for the last 4 or 5 years. Once I studied, I've always been very curious around health, fitness, and this 5 inches up here, or maybe it's 2 inches for me. About how we hack ourselves to get into better states and understand the mind. And Ryan has literally dedicated his life to neuroscience and health, performance, and kind of bundling that all together. I might hand over to Ryan just quickly as like, what's a summary of your journey so far, and what's keeping you excited right now? And thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. Always a good time to talk to you. So I guess my personal journey in brief was a windy path, mostly focused on health and wellness. Started in animal behavior, later found out that humans are a more interesting animal to study. I was overweight as a child, had a traumatic brain injury, was terrible in school, socially awkward, still a little bit socially awkward, but in a humorous fashion. And so I really struggled growing up with some of these health issues. So neuroscience, either as a pain point or as an interest point, has always been present. I became a personal trainer after losing some weight, primarily by playing a game called Dance Dance Revolution, if anyone remembers that. All the arrows going up and down the screen and stuff in the arcade, stepping on the arrows. And so I used my passion for gaming. I'm only 28, so I'm a 90s kid. So growing up in the 90s, lots of great video games, PlayStation, stuff like that. So lost weight doing that, but also started to do better in school and do better socially, as that led to me working out more. And so conceptually, or at least from my perception, I was improving cognitively, socially, and I didn't know how to put labels on it back then. But fitness really transformed my body, but also my brain, and probably more so my brain. I became a personal trainer, tried to become a physical therapist. I lived in West Africa for a year working in a physio clinic. Came back home, ended up not going to physical therapy school, became a soft tissue therapist to lay my hands on people and help get people out of pain, improve posture. And the fitness industry, which I've been in for about 10 years now, is not something that it provides an opportunity to provide a lot of impact, whether it's weight loss, getting out of pain, and now providing better health. But I really got bored. That's probably the easiest and most blunt way to put it. Is I got bored with getting people out of pain and helping people, be more active. Not that those things weren't impactful, but I wanted to see how I could impact people at a different level, at a deeper level. And that's where I had been sort of, working 10 hours a day, going home and thinking and studying neuroscience. And I started to get into the literature on exercise in the brain and see how exercise was transformative for cognitive function and brain health. But I also started to research things about sleep and nutrition, things that logically are common sense right now, and especially in the eye of the general public. But I didn't really see how my industry, the health and fitness industry, was actually having specific goals around brain health and then helping people get there. It wasn't saying exercise is good for your brain, do it. It was more about, okay, exercise is good for the brain. Different exercises have different effects. What do I do with an individual who is a unique person, and then take them through a unique program, right? That makes sense for weight loss or performance, but for brain health, that does not exist, either in the context of exercise or lifestyle in general. And so I basically quit my job and I enrolled in a master's of a neuroscience program from King's College of London, which I'm just wrapping up now. And I've been educating other people in the health and fitness industry for a couple years now on this topic, and created a course around it to essentially certify them as brain health trainers, so that they can start to gear their exercise programs towards brain health for the people they work with. Most of this is geared towards people who want to prevent cognitive decline, which we all do. Even people without explicit neurological conditions like dementia. You look at someone like Bill Gates, who is wildly successful, and in his documentary, he explicitly says his number one fear is losing the function of his mind. Essentially not being able to remember and not being able to utilize that organ of his, being the brain, right? That allowed him to be so successful. So oftentimes I think in entrepreneurship, we're going so hard, so fast, thinking we're invincible, but the sensitive organ called the brain is really the thing allowing you to be successful now and in the future. And my purpose now is to primarily help fitness professionals understand neuroscience and apply neuroscience to their clients. And what I do is I work at a place called the Pacific Brain Health Center. It's actually an outpatient medical clinic with psychologists, psychiatrists, neuropsychologists who assess cognition, neurologists, and there's several clinicians there. And we primarily see people with cognitive impairments or with cognitive concerns. That could be anyone who is young and healthy and wants to prevent dementia as much as they can, get a bunch of tests, whether it be neuroimaging and cognitive testing, and then consult with our team to implement strategies to delay cognitive decline and stay healthy. Or it could be someone with mild cognitive impairment where people have noticed they're really struggling with their memory, and what do you know, they actually tested positive for mild cognitive impairment, which is a diagnosable condition. Or it could be someone with dementia, and how do you improve those conditions, and how do you manage someone with dementia or even Parkinson's disease? So my breadth of coaching experience, where we actually run a brain gym where people come and work out with us doing brain body training. But then I'm also a brain health coach where people that don't do that still get value by walking away with a lifestyle program with my, more of my expertise being around exercise, and walking away with that program, able to hopefully better manage their brain health than they were able to before. So that's a little bit on me.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. And I'll never forget, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we spent 3 or 4 days together. Obviously, our joint friends and family at IOM Health, who are an ecosystem doing amazing things in the health space. And you getting me to think differently and being able to not shut down, but kind of fire up other parts of my brain by simple exercises. And it's interesting as such a simple exercise can be so difficult sometimes. So yeah, that's what I really enjoy about Ryan's type of training, is that it's simple in the way that it's prescribed, but it's the outcomes are pretty incredible if you stick with it, because you literally if Joe Dispenza or Bruce Lipton, you can literally rewire your brain. Is that right, Ryan? In regards to, like, we're so habitual and habit focused that we can actually, it's proven now that we can rewire our brains to think differently, act differently, belief systems, all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, the general concept of neuroplasticity is well acknowledged and regarded. It's really just the ability to change. So plasticity being change, neuro being your brain, right? And I think neuroplasticity is a fascinating concept. It certainly is given out of context to sell books, programs, supplements, etc. But certainly as you age, you still have the ability, but the effort required for such plasticity increases. So I think there's several aspects of neuroplasticity that people don't really talk about. I think one, they don't really differentiate between functional neuroplasticity and structural neuroplasticity. Functional neuroplasticity being the way they fire, the neurotransmitters, which can change in milliseconds, mind you. I mean, certainly you can feel better very quickly, or very feel terrible very quickly, right? Certainly if you start exercising, maybe when you started that exercise, you feel like crap, and then you start to get more energy right away, right? That's functional neuroplasticity, whereby the firing and wiring of the synaptic connections, the junctions between the neurons, actually can change. Now, does that actually mean just because it changes in that moment that it's significant with you for the rest of your life? No. I think a lot of people say, oh, I just make this belief and then it changes and structurally it's there. Structural changes can take longer, just like structural changes in your body take longer. So we're talking weeks, months, and years, right? And if we're trying to apply the principles of neuroplasticity, say psychology, to quote unquote undo, as many people in popular media put it, undo these negative thought patterns. Some of that has some evidence and some of that's blown a little bit out of proportion, but the excitement around that neuroplasticity, yes, does exist, and yes, is a mechanism that we can take advantage of, is very encouraging. And so whether it's psychology or whether it's more of the hardwired brain health, whereby you actually have assessment of your cognitive abilities, your mental faculties like attention, memory, reaction time, planning, all those complex functions you rely on every day without really noticing that you actually rely upon them to get things like work done. Those you can measure, and those you can typically change to a degree. It also, depends on the person, and depends on what you're changing and what you're trying to use to try to change it. But the answer is yes. Neuroplasticity is a very exciting thing that has been shown in research. And I think it just depends on the person. It depends on what we're trying to change and how we're trying to change it.
And if we bring it to some context about what's happening right now around the world, obviously with this coronavirus and people going into lockdown and isolation, and we're having a slight pivot in this conversation, but in regards to people being in isolation, lonely, massive forced change right now. And health as a word has always been posted with fitness, group exercise, CrossFit, but understanding now is probably the most important time, if any, to understand cognitive health, cognitive performance, or using the word brain around exactly the quote from Bill Gates is like, this is without this, health
none of it happens, right?
So,
and I would say it's super important. Yeah.
What are some simple tips or strategies or importance right now that we can look at health, our cognitive brain health? So we don't, like, we've had this conversation openly around my depression and anxiety and understanding the triggers. This is just going to go on hyperspeed with people having time to think. What are some simple tips and strategies around increasing our health of our brains right now? And
it's a very interesting time because, a lot of people are confined to the home. And so social support and social contact are incredibly important for brain health. A lot of people have villainized technology as something that stops you from having social contact. But here we are, where I was supposed to be in New Zealand in a couple days, right, with you. And certainly we are still using technology to keep this social connection alive and thriving, right? And so technology is actually enabling a lot of social contact, and in fact, all social contact right now. And it's incredibly important for brain health, whereby there's a concept called cognitive reserve, which is basically your brain's gas tank. And so there's been studies done showing nuns, not all nuns, but wherever these specific nuns were, they didn't have any cognitive issues. They showed no signs of dementia, even in old age. Yet when they died at a much later age, and they lived for quite a while, they looked at their brains and they saw they were riddled with amyloid plaques and proteins that make it look like it was the brain of someone with Alzheimer's disease, but yet they didn't have it. And so they really observed them retrospectively in their culture and what was it? And it's sort of like the people that live a long time, these blue zones, very similar, where they had social contact, religion, which I think you don't have to have religion to have health, but mindfulness and spirituality and a sense of community is very powerful. Mediterranean style diet. Of course, you don't imagine nuns doing CrossFit, but they were physically active to a degree, right? Cognitively stimulating themselves, always learning. And so these things that contribute to cognitive reserve are of primary interest right now. So some of those would be social stimulation and community, being able to keep your cognitive stimulation, whether it be something through work or something through gaming or something through hobbies. Anything that's stimulating your brain is theoretically going to help. Some people even turn to brain games, and I think that's equivalent to a supplement as is to a diet, right? So you don't take supplements in place of your diet. You have hopefully a good diet and take supplements on top of that. We might consider brain games and cognitive stimulation. You have your work and you have your life, and then you add things like that on top. They're almost like supplements. Then of course, exercise. Exercise is actually the biggest one. And the World Health Organization released a big review of things that, according to the most evidence, are going to help with brain health and slow cognitive decline. And exercise is at the very tip top, followed by sleep, followed by stress, with things like supplements and brain games more so at the bottom. Not that those are not helpful. So we want to start, just like you're investing in the stock market, we want to invest in the things that are going to bring forth the most brain health benefits. A lot of people right now are investing in supplements and ozone therapy and stuff that just doesn't have a lot of evidence, mostly out of fear. And what I would encourage people to do, and this is true for immune system health and stuff like that, exercise, sleep, and stress management are the three primary ones. at the top of your list that you want to focus on. Many people's habits are now changing because environment often dictates behavior. So whereas you went to the gym and you were working with your trainer 2 to 3 times a week, now that's gone. And you've been disrupted. And so people, both businesses and individuals, are really pivoting to find what is their new environment that they can thrive in. And I would say exercise is part of the first piece of that puzzle. And some people are jumping online and enrolling in online programs, and I think that's great. And I think what people should be concerned about is, one, just doing it if you're not doing it. If you are doing it, doing more of it. And then if you've done that, then be able to have a variety. So aerobic exercise, have some coordinative exercise like a dance or a Tai Chi or a martial art of some sorts, and be able to have some resistance training, albeit you're not going to have heavy loads in your home, that's okay. Be able to do resistance training to keep your muscles and bones and your musculature stimulated. And so doing all 3 of those things is going to be really important, because each type of exercise, aerobic, skill-based like dance or martial arts or a sport of some sort, and resistance, all do different unique things to the brain that are going to be really vital for your cognitive health, your brain structure, your brain function, and your mental health. So having what we call a multimodal program for brain health is really important right now in the context of exercise. And of course, that will help with stress and help with sleep. And then if you wanted to, we could review, sleep hygiene practices, which I think people understand, and stress management practices, which I think are rather intuitive for people at this point in time.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I suppose that variability, as you said, if you haven't done any and then you're starting, you've done more. I've got ADHD, or maybe I do, or maybe I
yeah.
Variability is for my health and fitness. So knowing that week I don't have weights at my house right now, so it's about hiking and getting outdoors. Knowing that next week there's weights at my other place where I quarantine for the next 3 weeks. Variability is the key, isn't it? It's just like if people just doing CrossFit for 12 months or just doing yoga, it kind of, the brain stops adapting, doesn't it? Does it just kind of?
Well, it's like, if you went on a 3-month program and that's new to you, you're going to see really good physical results typically, right? And there is a sense of novelty to that. And we don't want to do novelty for the sake of novelty. And certainly people with ADHD like you and me probably hide behind that sometimes. But it's not so important to just mix it up for the sake of it and keeping interest. While that is important, we do want you to have interest, and we do want you to have a good mood while you're doing what you're doing. But most certainly, you want routine to get into the habit. But I think people are so obsessed with habits in the modern era that like, I just do the habit, it's good forever. It's like, well, the reason you want the habit probably is because it reduces the amount of cognitive load that it takes. But that cognitive load that's usually put into learning a new skill is actually the nutrient that we're after here for brain health. If you literally had the same day-to-day job, you would get bored. So that's why you need a lot of entrepreneurs love entrepreneurship, because it's different, it's unexpected, and they get to play chess with their brain in a lot of ways. I think for exercise, it can be similar, where you do want, there's 3 phases of motor learning. So you've probably heard about the 10,000 hours. That doesn't really apply to health and wellness. It might apply to mastery, but I don't talk to a lot of people that's like, I want to master the deadlift. Like maybe they set that goal. I don't know if that's really subservient to their goals, unless it's very, very specific and they really do care about it, or they're a competitor. But the 10,000 hours thing for this type of conversation really isn't important. You introduce a task at what's called the cognitive phase of motor learning. It's a little awkward. You make some mistakes. It's really demanding of your brain. So, for example, what's something, have you done Zumba recently?
I haven't done Zumba. Me and Sarah are talking about doing some dance classes, and it could be quite awful.
Well, imagine you doing Zumba right now. What would be the experience? Would you be really like Rico Suave about it? Or would you look like an idiot a little bit?
I feel like the robot man.
Right. So that's the cognitive phase of motor learning. But on your 5th Zumba class, it's a little bit more smoothed out, albeit still a little bit awkward, and you still have to pay attention and think about it. Yeah. And then the 3rd phase would be like, you are Rico Suave. That's the autonomous phase. Now, what we're after, if we want brain health, is the cognitive phase and the associative phase. But you don't want to hit mastery. You want to go back to the cognitive phase, whether it's a new skill Or let's say you've gone from Zumba Gold, which is for older adults, which I could see you doing, and then you've gone to more like professional level Zumba if it existed, right? And so we want to mix it up to that degree where it might take a few weeks to get to that level, and then you mix it up. So let's say every 3 months or every quarter, you want some novelty in there at the minimum, right? So yes, for example, my fiance Laura is a Zumba instructor, and being quarantined, we're doing a good amount of dance now. And dude, my black eyed peas, it's just off the chain right now. So certainly, introducing new skills that have some set of cognitive demand, whether they be skill-based or not, is helpful. For me, I'm a gamer, so I've been using virtual reality boxing, and that keeps me going. I can't go to a boxing gym. Even before the COVID stuff, I didn't want to go to a boxing gym because I didn't have time and I want to pay for the class. But I'm just in my living room, 9 p.m., boxing really hardcore. That's fun for me. It's a new skill and it's challenging. So I think, that's usually the nutrient that's missing from people's exercise programs because they're so focused on weight loss, getting the cardio in, getting the weightlifting in, which is important. And in the examples you gave, it is important to be practicing yoga or CrossFit. But certainly this novel skill learning is usually what's missing from people's programming.
By people exercising cognitive health, that obviously can benefit physical health as well because there's cognitive load, correct? So
that's right. And actually research has found in most cases that it's actually more metabolically demanding. So if you've ever been boxing or you've played tennis or you've done dance, you're sweating. It burns a lot of calories, right? So you're going to end up having better joints unless it's injurious or you're not prepared musculoskeletally for that task. So, but most of the time it's good for your range of motions. You're in this unpredictable, more open bubble versus this loaded linear bubble, right?
You know how retarded I am when it comes to any type of like synchronization or actually thinking about like moving other sides of my body. What is it called? Bilateral movement.
Bilateral coordination or unilateral coordination or asynchronous or synchronous. And so the cerebellum sits right at the back of the brain, underneath the part of your brain responsible for vision. And that cerebellum houses 50% of a certain type of your brain's neurons. And it has a track through the thalamus to the prefrontal cortex, which is called your CEO of the brain. So if you were to dance and actually try to demand your coordinative demands, you would find it very challenging. You really need to think about it and probably a little bit frustrating. And most people, especially if they're in a social setting, at that point would give up and say, I don't like this, I'm not good at it. But if we took the concept of brain health and we said, hey, if you're bad at it, it probably means you need it. And I kid you not, I have had patients that come into our center and imagine you 70 years old, right? Or 60 years old. And they've had a brain scan and that part of the brain, the cerebellum, is atrophied and they're still bad at dancing, right? It doesn't mean that dance could have saved their brain, but really if we're talking that coordinative exercise has been missing from that program, one general concept is you use it or lose it, right? And so the reason I recommend those three things, aerobic, resistance, and coordinative or skill-based, is because they all it's basically like a whole brain health workout whereby you can address more areas of the brain and its substructures with that approach. And so if you didn't take up dance, you might be that guy that I've worked with that had mild cognitive impairment, literally was a doctor. And so if his brain stopped working, he would have to stop his job. That is his identity. And it doesn't mean that's the only thing we did. We actually did cognitive motor training. He did a combination of weightlifting and aerobic exercise. He adopted a healthy diet. He started practicing meditation. He had sleep apnea and he started wearing a CPAP to control that so oxygen could get to his brain. And now he's gone from mild cognitive impairment diagnosed to normal. And so people, if they are aggressive, one, we want to prevent because we know the signs and symptoms of these neurodegenerative diseases, which are becoming more and more exponentially feasible. I think it's like 115 million people by 2050 across the world, with Australia, New Zealand, and Asia having the highest rates in the world than any other sections. And then United States right in second place. So pretty crazy stuff. So, I mean, we all, regardless of age, even if we don't feel like we would have dementia, we think it's past us. But even if it's in your family, you're at a higher risk than if it's not. And 20 to 30 years later, these changes start to occur in the brain. And so for all entrepreneurs, I would say certainly there's no age range on entrepreneurs, right? But for our audience that we're talking to here, let's theorize that's 35 to 55. That is actually the ideal age to give a crap about your brain health, because you actually need to start doing this stuff now so that you can accumulate the health benefits, sort of like a savings bond, right? And you can start accumulating those now and boosting that cognitive reserve to slow your cognitive decline now and in the future.
What's like I always, I love my data and love to, like, whether it's my Garmin watch, seeing how much I've slept and how much REM I've got, and obviously sleep's a whole another conversation, which I know you've helped me out a lot along these days in regards to sleep, and it's literally transformed the way I operate during the day.
Yeah.
But what with brain health, what's a baseline or simple check-in that we can do? Because there's no easy way to get plugged up to a brain scanner to go, where am I actually sitting in the brain health compared to my age? Is there some tests or anything?
There are tests you can take. If certainly going to a doctor and getting a cognitive assessment would be helpful, right? There are general doctors that might offer that or refer you to, say, a neurologist. And certainly if you're subjectively having problems, if your memory is a little off, and maybe you thought it was normal, right?
So my memory's off right now. So in regards to, and Sarah will vouch this, she's like, I feel like I have such a cognitive load during the day, and probably do so much in the day cognitively, thinking scenarios, ideation,
right,
thinking forward versus being present, and still that remembering what I did yesterday or 2 weeks ago. So memory is a big thing. So, and I'm sure.
Yeah, certainly there's cognitive assessments that doctors can do, neurologists, neuropsychologists. There are some, but if we didn't want to go down that route, because that's a little involved for some, then certainly there's online cognitive testing, computerized cognitive testing. I wouldn't, you can try Googling, brain tests and memory questionnaires, but the validity of those things is probably not going to be super strong, especially if there's a product attached to it. But that's why a lot of people come to me for, referral to these things or recommending these things. Yeah. But subjective cognition, meaning your subjective interpretation of it. There's even a questionnaire called the Cognitive Failures Questionnaire, and it's asking about day-to-day things within the last 7 days that you've noticed. Do you often misplace your keys? Do you often have trouble interpreting signposts or street directions or something like that? And really those subjective interpretations of how you feel, is my attention there? Is my processing speed good? Is my memory good? You don't want to compare yourself to 20 years ago, but you could, but you really just want to use your subjective awareness of it to see where you're at. And look, if you improved your sleep, or for your example, maybe had less cognitive resources given out so rapidly and readily throughout the day, and maybe took things slower and just did less, maybe you might find those resources that you're trying to attribute to things you're trying to memorize may be available, and maybe your memory isn't as bad. Or maybe you do find that your REM sleep isn't as good lately because you've been tracking it, and you take sleep hygiene practices into consideration to help with that. So those are a few things that I would look at.
Yeah, I love it. Do less, and you're not the first person to tell me to do less and just be still. And I do find that when I went out into nature for 2 hours today and went for a hike, and obviously sent you some photos, is that being in there and you don't have distractions or cognitive, you feel like you get clarity. So that's why I
it's a different brain network. And so in 30 seconds or less, I guess the cognitive or the executive network is the one that's focused on doing things and working, right? And sometimes we just need to shut that off to what's called the default mode network, which is the mind wandering network. And so I think a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, are really, really invested in the central executive network, and then are wondering why things are harder after that, or they get really restless when they're not doing something. That network's too active. We got to calm it down. Hiking, nature, mindfulness, all that stuff is great for that.
Yeah, right. Really coming up on the half an hour. Just really appreciate just some context around this whole brain health topic. And I just think through this time, it's just going to accelerate. Like the word health is finally going to be, a lot more broad in regards to just lifting weights and
I think like right now it's, people don't have weight loss as the biggest priority. It's psychological health and perhaps cognitive health. And I think that's going to carry back into the real world after all this is kind of settled. And I think, my industry has to be prepared for that. And I think people should also think about, having that as a goal. What is my goal for my health and wellness beyond my physical body? What is that? And really looking at manipulating the variables of all the activities you may or may not be engaging in to reflect that goal.
Such a powerful question. Yeah. What is, defining what health is for you just past your physical body. And once you ask that question, then you can start discovering, doing some deeper work. And I know you've been a massive support network for me going through the ups and downs, and gutted that you couldn't come down to Queenstown, but we will be doing a virtual summit, which obviously you're literally running from this call to another virtual summit. So thanks for taking some time during the weekend just to share your insights. And obviously I'll post some links to some articles of Ryan's, and we will be having the Evolve virtual summit at the back end of this month. So Ryan, mate, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks,
man. Where can people find you, man?
They can go to ryanglatt.com, or they can check out my work at brainhealthtrainer.com.
Sweet, man.
Yes.
Keep up the awesome work. My take home is I probably should start dancing and might download the Zumba app. I might do my second or third video. The first one.
Can't wait to see some Facebook Lives of that.
Awesome, man. Well, have a good afternoon, and we'll chat soon, man. Really appreciate it.
You too, man. Thank you.